Okay, good night, everyone. Welcome. Thank you all for joining us. And we are sponsored in our tour through this Masechta by Shalom Fogel, Nishmas Yaakov Zeb ben Yodai, Rivka Bas Yaakov Yosef, Tzivya Miriam Bas Gad, Yosef ben Tzion ben Yaakov Zev, and for a great shidduch for Chayat Tzivya Bas Shoshana Gittel by A.B. Spry, by Baruch Ian, Lila Nishmas Yaakov Chaim Ben Abba, Esther Bas Yona, and Avram Ben Shmuel HaKayin, and Lefur Shalema for Liba Bas Anya, for the spiritual, emotional, and physical protection, for Yeshua Menachem Mendel Ben Bela Shendel Rivka. We learn, sponsored by Baruch Shkeseman for Shoshana Bas Adina, and by Mark Frankel. Ilui Nishmas, his father, Yisrael Tzvi Ben Chaim Yeshua Falik, and the Neshama should have an aliyah. It's wonderful to see everyone. Oh, A.B. Spry is back. Hi. Hi, good morning, A.B. Good, welcome back. Good to see you.
Thank you.
Good to see you. And look at this, 1 minute the person is in our show, 1 minute he's back with us. Really good to see you, A.B. And, okay, so I'll tell you, the first daf tonight is challenging, and then the second daf is easy. So we're going to go from a little intricacy to easy. So
every daf is challenging.
Okay.
You, Barry. Oh, stop it.
Okay. No, there's nothing funny. And in the Midbar, this is the Sukkos. We remember the traveling in the Midbar, and in the Midbar they also had the Erev Rav. Hey,
wait a second. I think we're being referred to here, Barry.
Yisrael asked me to give the coordinates. We're 11 lines from the bottom of Daf Chav Beis Amud Beis at Omar Ula. So let me remind you a little bit about the Ziknei Dorim. The Ziknei Dorim said a very big chiddush. They said that since if the majority of the community was Tameh, the Pesach was brought b'Tumah, so therefore they held, and it's a very big novelty, that if a Kayin, an individual Kayin brings a carbon while he's Tameh, b'di Eved, it's good. The tit is Marata, and b'di Eved, it's good. That's a very big novelty. Now, just to remind you, the Ziknei Dorim also hold that the Pesach could be brought by a Tamei Sheretz. That means that if Marshall touched the Sheretz, so on Erev Pesach, when they bring the Korban Pesach, he's not Roi, he's Tamei. Even if he goes to the mikveh, he has to have Erev Shemesh. He has to have the setting of the sun. But they could shech the carbon for him, and he'll be able to eat it in the night. So, two things that the Ziknei Dorim say, that sheichtin al tmei sheretz, and that if a kohen is tamei, and he shechts the carbon, b'di eved, it's good, which is a huge chiddush. So Reish Lakish attacks this rule of the Ziknei Dorim. There's a very, very weighty discussion which has ramifications in different places in Shas, whether the Ziknei Dorim are Tanoim or Amoraim. And it's easier to learn that they were Amoraim, but there is an opinion that they were Tanoim. But so again, and for those that are just joining us, 11 lines from the bottom of Daf Chav Beis Amud Beis. Amar Ula, Takalu Reish Lakish L'Dromai. the Reish Lakish stormed, really clobbered the Ziknei Darim. V'chi'eze koyach meruba. Who has more rights? Koyach mechaprim or koyach miskaprim? Those that are mechaper, the koyin, or those that are miskaprim, those that bring the carbon. Heavy omer koyach miskaprim, those that are atoned for, because we said that if Marshall is a Tamei Sheretz, you could bring a carbon for him. He's the one that's being atoned for. Yet a koyin that's a Tamei Sheretz cannot bring a carbon. So, as the Gemara explains, Oma b'makom shenitmu ba'alim b'sheretz, where the owner became Tamei from a sheretz. Mishalchin carbon isayan, we can shech the carbon on behalf of Marshall when he's a Tamei Sheretz, and he could eat it in the night. But koyin shenitma b'sheretz ein a maratza, but a koyin that came Tamei from a sheretz, he cannot bring a carbon. So then we should say the same thing by Tumah. Malkum shenitmu ba'alim b'meis, where if the owners were Tamei Meis, and they weren't the majority, so let's say Marshall and Barry and Mark, right? The dynamic trio.
That's Three Stooges.
Let's say they became Tamei, and it's Erev Pesach. We don't bring the carbon on their behalf. They go to Pesach Sheni. So Malcolm, in a place, Shenitmu Ba'alim B'meis, where the owners become Tamei B'meis, She'ein Mishalchin Karbanai saying, we don't send their carbonas on their behalf, rather we push them to Pesach Sheni. So Koyin Shenitma B'meis, then if the Koyin became Tamei B'meis, Einoi Din She'ein Maratza, surely he shouldn't be able to bring the carbon. But the Ziknei Darim say that if a Koyin was Tamei B'di'evid, his carbon is accepted. So the Gemara says, you know what? The Ziknei Darim keep on surprising us. The Gemara tells us, because Savar Ziknei Darim, the Ziknei Darim hold that Tamei Meis Nami, that in the event that Mark, Barry, and Marshall become Tamei, B'di'evid, not l'chadchila they have to go to Pesach Sheni. But b'di'evid mishalech carbon isav. If we do the carbon Pesach for them, they're yotzi. Now, of course, they can't eat the carbon Pesach because their tummy makes for 7 days. So, I mean, if they would eat the carbon Pesach, they would get chorus for eating the carbon Pesach, but Tumas Aguf. But the Ziknei Darim hold that the eating of the carbon Pesach is not ma'akev. It's not. It doesn't stop them from fulfilling the mitzvah. Says the Gemara, v'aksiv, but it says in the pasuk, ish kiyah tamei. If a person is tamei v'asa Pesach b'chodesh hasheni, he's supposed to do the Pesach on the second Pesach, not the first Pesach. Says the Gemara, la mitzvah. But if they don't do it, and it was offered on their behalf, it's good. Says the Gemara, but wait a second. They can't eat it. And Voksiv, it says, as we welcome in Gedalia Engel, as we start the top of Chav Gimel Amud Aleph, Voksiv, Ish Lefi Achloi, every man according to his eating. So you have to eat. Says the Gemara, that's not ma'akev, that's only the mitzvah. Says the Gemara, L'kuvei Loi, if you don't eat the carbon Pesach, it doesn't invalidate the mitzvah. But Tanya, it says that when you bring the carbon Pesach, b'michsas nefashis, this is an interesting halacha. You can't just walk in and eat the carbon Pesach in someone's house. That's what they ask in Halach Ma'ani. It says, "Kol d'tzrich yeseh v'yifsach." You can't walk in. you have to have been registered on the Korban Pesach. V'tanya b'michsas nefashis malamed she'ena Pesach nishchat ela lemenuyav. It has to be eaten only by its registrants. So even if somebody like Marshall would turn up by my Seder, he wouldn't be able to partake of my Korban Pesach. He could have the karpas, right? He could have the borscht, but he can't have the Korban Pesach. Now, how do we know that that's just not a mitzvah l'chadchila? Shachtu shaloi l'menuyav yachol yeh ka'over al mitzvah. I might think that you didn't do it the right way, but b'di'evet he could eat. Talmud Leimer, it says it again. T'chaisu should be registered, and by repeating it, akasim shana alav la'akeh. Now, what does it have to do with eating? The iskish oichlin l'menuyan. That eating is juxtaposed to registration. Just like registration is ma'akiv, eating is also ma'akiv. So how could the Ziknei Darim hold that if we shecht on behalf of Mark and Barry, they're yotze the mitzvah? Says the Gemara, the Ziknei Darim loy makshe. The Ziknei Darim are not makish the achila l'menuyav. So they hold, although the registrants are ma'akiv, but eating is not ma'akiv. Says, well, but wait a second. We still have a kasha on the Ziknei Darim. Says the Gemara, Mahanami Yislu Pircha. Uma b'mokum shenitmu ba'alim b'sheretz. In the case where, let's say, Marshall became tummy with a sheretz. So, the din is, Mishalchin Korban Oisei and the Chadchila, we could offer his carbon, yet, Kayin Shenitma B'Sheretz, a Kayin that became tummy with a sheretz, he cannot bring a carbon, Ein Amaratza. Mokum Shenitmu Ba'alim B'Meis, She'im Mishalchin Korban Oisei and the Chadchila. Everybody agrees that you can't do that. L'chadchila, send Mark, Barry's, and Marshall's carbon, shechted l'chadchila for them, but rather l'chadchila you're supposed to go to Pesach Sheni. So then kayin shenitma b'meis, surely that kayin that becomes tabim b'meis ain't a din she'ein a maratza. While the Ziknei Darim, that's the whole novelty of the Ziknei Darim. The Ziknei Darim say that since Tumah is hutra b'tzibur, if a kayin does a private carbon b'tumah, b'di'evet it's maratza. Now this kasha on the Ziknei Darim, the Gemara does not answer. Now, although it's a very difficult Gemara, but now I'll try to pause and take Rabbi Kran's question.
The Gemara basically asked my question. I don't have any more questions.
Okay.
You're not yoked if you don't eat the Korban Pesach. That was my point.
Right, so the Gemara says that according to the Ziknei Darim, you are. It's not ma'akiv.
Even if you don't eat it.
Even if you're not, don't eat it.
Okay. I don't think we pass it that way.
We do not. Now, see, that's just a very good lesson to not interrupt in the middle. You might find out that your question the Gemara asks. Now, you know what, since we braked already, let me start welcoming in everybody. You know, it's wonderful when when whatever we do, we learn Torah. And those that are learning Torah in the Sukkah, bravo. You know, I mentioned on Yom Tov that they asked Rav Steinman, what's the Iker Avodah b'Sukkah? And Rav Steinman said the Iker Avodah in the Sukkah is to be in the Sukkah. And they tell over a gripping story that in 1961, someone offered to take the stipler on Sukkot to the Kaisel. Wasn't easy to go to the Kaisel. And the stipler said, thank you, but I don't want to leave the Sukkah. So he didn't leave the Sukkah to go to the Kaisel. Be in the Sukkah. Yesod V'Sharish Avodah says, that every minute you're not in the sukkah, you're missing out on the mitzvah saseh of Basukkas Teishvu Shivas Yom. But one of the reasons to go out of the sukkah is to, if you could learn better outside of the sukkah, you go out of the sukkah to learn better. It's a new halacha that if you don't have internet connection, so you're part from the sukkah in order to have internet connection in the house. Now, to learn b'chabura is definitely a reason to learn outside of the sukkah. You have to know that, of course, there's many reasons to learn to go out of the sukkah. Reb Ruvain used to take all the grandchildren, maybe he still does it, but one day he took all the grandchildren on Chol Hamoed to the zoo and talked to them about the different halachas of animals. So there are many reasons. The same reason why he's allowed to spend time with the grandchildren and not be learning. So it's the same reason why you're allowed to leave the sukkah. Now, so now, we now said a new chiddush. We're really saying big chidushim. We're now saying a chiddush that b'di'evet, if we shecht on behalf of people that are tamei the carbon Pesach, even though of course they can't eat it, and they were supposed to do it on Pesach Sheni, but b'di'evet, if we do it, they're yotzei. So now the Gemara says, well, but didn't we learn that way? Meisvei. And again, I want to remind you, if you didn't hear me say it, that the second daf tonight is much easier. When we get through this hard daf, we'll have an easier daf to learn. Now, I know people like Mark get very upset when they hear that. Mark wants to challenge. This is what, makes his blood pump. But there are some of us lesser mortals that like an easy daf. But anyway, Meisvei. Mipnei she'amru nazir v'oiseh Pesach. It says that the nazir and the one that makes the Pesach, hatzitz meratza, the tzitz, which was the gold plate that the Kohen Gadol wore on his forehead, it had certain spiritual therapeutic powers. So hatzitz meratza al tumas dam, for the tumah of blood. That means if the blood became tamei, but it was offered on the mizbeach, the carbon is kosher. But ve'ein hatzitz meratza al tumas haguf. But the tzitz is not meratza on the tumah of the body. So b'mai ilema b'tumah sheretz. If it means the tzitz should be meratza for the tumah sheretz, we don't need the tzitz to be meratza for the tumah sheretz, because we said that you could be shaykhet on behalf of somebody that's a tumah sheretz. So I'm a shaykhet v'zorken al tumah sheretz. Ella tumas meis. And v'kitani, and it says that einat tzitz meratza. So it says that the tzitz is not meratza when the owner becomes tamei. Alma, this is clearly not what we said. Alma nitmu ba'alam b'meis, that if Mark and Barry and Marshall are tamei, ein mishalchin karbanei seim. We can't send the carbon on their behalf because the tzitz is not meratza. Says Malay, either tamei ba'alam b'meis, if they were tamei b'meis b'di'eved, hachanami. If we send it on their behalf, they fulfill the mitzvah. And notwithstanding that they can't eat it, but the Ziknei Dvarim hold that Chila is not ma'akev. But hacha b'may askinon kigan shenit makayin b'sheretz. It's talking about where the kayin, not the owners, because the owners we said shaykh the mezarkin al tmei sheretz. But we're talking about if the kayin became tamei from a sheretz, the tzitz is not maratza. Says the Gemara, Ihachi, if that's the case, Ema Seifa, Nitma Tumas HaTahim. If the Kayin became Tameh with Tumas HaTahim, a Tumah that no one knew was there, Hatzitz Maratza. So, if you're going to learn that it's talking about Tumah Sheretz, is there a dispensation for Tumas HaTahim by Tumah Sheretz? The case of Tumas Tahim, of Tumah Sheretz, would be that somebody stuck his hand in the ground and he touched a sheretz that nobody knew was there. The sheretz was buried by a landslide. Nobody knew it was there. But Hatani Rab Chia loy amru Tumas HaTahim el l'meis bilvad. The dispensation of Tumas HaTahim is only by Tumas HaMeis, an underground tumah that nobody knew about. Doesn't that come Lemute Mai, Lav Lemute Tumas HaTahim de Sheretz, that there is no dispensation for Tumas Sheretz, Tumas HaTahim de Sheretz? Says the Gemara Loi. Just like there's a dispensation for Tumas HaTahim of a mace, there's a dispensation for Tumas HaTahim of Sheretz also. What that's coming to be Mamayit, that it's only by Tumas HaTahim the mace, that's coming to be Mamayit, a very unusual case, which is not mentioned very often in Shas. It's coming to be Mamayit, the case of Tumas HaTahim de Ziva. Very interesting case. Loilam ute Tumas HaTahim de Ziva. Now, what's Tumas HaTahim de Ziva? Well, what does that mean? So, this is a case, just like Tumas HaTahim is something that no one knew about. This is a case where no one can figure out if he's a Zav or not. It means that he saw this issue of Ziva at twilight. Now, twilight could belong only to the day before. It could belong to the next day, or it could be part the day before and the part the next day. Now, if it's part the day before and the part the next day, then he's a Baal Shtei Re'iyas, and he's a Zav for 7 days. But we don't know if it's only Monday, or if it's only Tuesday, or if it's part Monday and part Tuesday. So I might think that since it's something that nobody knows, there should be a dispensation of Tumas Tahim. It's coming to tell us, no, there's only a dispensation for Tumas Tahim by Mace and by Sheretz, but not by Ziva. Says the Gemara, Ve'elahod deboi Rami Bar Chama, Kayin Amaratza b'Karbanei Seyam. The Kayin that does the karbanos hutu like Tumas HaTahim oilai, hutu like Tumas HaTahim. Is there a dispensation if he became tamei from Tumas HaTahim? Tivshat the Tumas HaTahim hutu like, because here it says it's talking about the kayin, and it's telling us there's a dispensation of Tumas HaTahim for the kayin. The ha'acha b'kayin kaimina. Says the Gemara, you're right. Rami Bar Chama definitely does not learn the Brisa this way. Rami Bar Chama learns that it's talking about the person that became Tameh, not the Kayin. And that if the person becomes Tameh, the tzitz is not Maratza, and therefore, according to Rami Bar Chama, you would not be able to offer the carbon on behalf of Mark, Marshall, and Barry. So the Rami Bar Chama Vadei Pligi, he argues. But the Ziknei Dorim could learn that it refers to the Kayin and not to the people. Now, Toshma, V'nosa Aaron es Avoin HaKadoshim. Aaron lifts with the power of his tzitz the sin of the Kachim. Now, what sin does he lift? What sin does he cause to be removed? The Chi'eza Avain Noisei, as we start Chav Gimel Amid Beis, the Chi'eza Avain Hu Noisei. Im Avain Pigel, that if somebody shechted it with a machshava to eat it chutz l'zmanoi or to smoke it up chutz l'zmanoi, the tzitz removes, that can't be. Because Harik Kfar Nemer, it says in the Pasuk, Lo Yechoshev, it should never be counted. Im Avoy Noiser, if it was left after its permitted time, that can never be removed. Harik Kfar Nemer Lo Yerotze, it's not accepted. Ha'ena Noisei Ela Avoyin Tuma Shehotra Michlala B'tzibur. It lifts the sin of Tumah. Now, my Tumah, what Tumah does it lift? Ilaima Mituma Sheretz. If it's talking about Tumah Sheretz, Heichi Ishterei. What does it mean that the Tumah of Sheretz was permitted b'tzibur? The Tumah of Sheretz is never permitted b'tzibur. We said that you could shecht the carbon for somebody that's Tumah Sheretz. So therefore, Ela Tumas Meis. It must be that it lifts the Tumah of Meis. V'lav kigayin shenitnu ba'ilum b'meis. It must be that the Mark and Marshall and Barry became Tomei, and if we offered the carbon on their behalf, Alma nitmu ba'ilum b'meis mishalchin carbonei sen, which would be a riot to what we said on behalf of the Ziknei Darim. Says the Gemara, Ubamai. So you can't be referring to a Nazir. Ubamai, Ibn Nazir. We know once that Nazir becomes Tameh, he loses his days. So his carbon can't be accepted. Ibn Nazir, if someone dies, he loses all his days. He definitely can't bring a carbon. Ela I say Pesach. So we see here a raya that if we bring the carbon on behalf of Barry, Mark, and Marshall or Tomei, that it's good. Really, they should wait to Pesach Sheni, but if we do it, it's good. Says the Gemara, no, la'olam b'sheretz. It's talking about with Tumah Sheretz. And it's talking about where the Kayin became Tomei with a Tumah of Sheretz. We said that since it was permitted by Tzibur, and we said the Tumah of Sheretz is not permitted in the Tzibur, says the Gemara, V'shem Tumah ba'olam. There is Tumah that's permitted by Tzibur. Not Sheretz, but there is Tumah in the world, because Tumah's Meis, if the community is Tumah, you bring it. Now one more piece over here. Did I welcome everybody in yet? Yeah, I did, right? No, I didn't. So we welcome in Saba, Mel, Marshall, Yitzi Fuchs, Dr. Guy, Irving Fishbaum, Yisrael Fisher, Nachman Chapler, Barry Cement, Dr. Block, Menachem Yamansky, Yitzi Muller, Yaakov Warman. Yaakov, we missed you. Mark, Gedalia Engel. Gedalia is feeling a little better, but he was a hero this Yom Tov, doing everything even though he's suffering from cellulitis. You should have a refuah shalema. Rabbi Kaniel, Shimon Deer, it's good to see you. Michal, Shali Zeitlin, Rabbi Kranz, Yeshua Shmuel Eisenberg. It was great to have your father, Yeshua Shmuel, and your brother-in-law, Danny Vogel, Stephen Holtzman, Rebellia Yaffe, who was greatly missed, Ilya Shutman, and whoever Daddy is.
I don't know.
You?
I know who my daddy was.
It would help like this. Who? Oh, Rabbi Avram Zepkowitz.
Marshall, who's your daddy?
Who we missed as well.
Ask my mom.
Okay, one more piece over here.
Isn't Mark here?
Now, v'ike dedayik u'maisi hachi. Then there are those that are more exact, and they quote as follows. It says that v'nosa aron es avoin hakochim. a sin on the kachim. Avoin hakachim in, avoin makdishin loy, but not those that are doing the sanctifying. My tumah. Ilema tumah sheretz. It says over here that it was permitted b'tzibur, but the tumah sheretz is not permitted b'tzibur. Miyashtarya b'tzibur. Elalav, it must refer to tumas meis. V'avoin kachim in, and it removes the tumah from the kachim. Avoin makdishim loy, but not from those that are consecrating it. That which is not like the Ziknei Darim, who say that if the Kohen is Tameh, he could, even if he does it for a private offering, it's good b'di'evet. Says the Gemara, no. Loy lam tumah sheretz. And it's telling you that the tzitz is not maratza if the kohen became tamei sheretz. It says that it was hutra b'tzibah, and tumah sheretz is not hutra b'tzibah. V'shem tumah b'olam. And when it says hutra b'tzibah, it means that there is a tumah that's hutra b'tzibah, but it's not referring to the tumah sheretz, it's referring to the tumah's mace. Okay, now everybody could sigh a little bit of a breath of relief. Yoshev. It says that if you're sitting and you do the avodah sitting, you disqualify the avodah. Minola. So Amar Nachman Amar Kra La'amod L'Shareis. You have to stand to minister. La'amida b'chartiv. I chose you to do it standing. V'lo yeshiva. Now again, how do we know that it, even if you do it, it's ma'akev? Tan Rabbanon La'amod L'Shareis mitzvah. Kishu Aimer ha'oimdim. So it says again standing. Shana alav akasav la'akev. The Torah repeats it to tell us that it will invalidate if you're sitting. Question is, if a kohen is sitting, he doesn't get misa. But why not? Amalei Rav Nachman michte yoshev kizar dami. Sitting is like a non-kohen. Umeichel avoda, and this creates the avoda. So why don't we say ema mazar b'misa af yoshev b'misa? Sitting is also b'misa. But it's not true. Allah Matanya, Ovel, Aval Orel, not Ovel, Aval Orel, but an uncircumcised Kayin, Einain, or one who lost a relative that day, Yoshev, or one who was sitting, Einon b'misa alabazhara. But since Yoshev disqualifies like a Zar, just like a Zar is b'misa, shouldn't sitting also be b'misa? Says the Gemara, you're right, but we have a rule. Mishum davi mechusa begadim v'shaloi richutz yadayim v'raglayim. It says that there's misa for one who doesn't have the 4 vestments, or one who didn't wash his hands with the kiyah. And we have a rule, shnei ksum v'mabon ke'echad, when 2 psukim teach us the same thing, v'kol shnei ksum v'mabon ke'echad ein melamdin. Because if the Torah wanted it to be widespread, it would only teach us in one place, and we would learn out from there to everywhere. When it teaches us in 2 places, that's to tell us only these 2 places and nowhere else. Says the Gemara, Lamandi Yama Malamdin, and one who says that if you have 2 places, you could still learn from it. Oh, it's 3 places. Because Suya Yayin, it says Misa also by one who is inebriated, intoxicated. Havalei Shlishi. And everybody holds, Ushloisha l'divrei hakol, if it says a law of 3 places, l'divrei hakol ein melamdin, we don't learn it out to anywhere else. Okay, now, we did the hard daf, and although we apologize to Mark, we're now going to do the easier daf.